Today we're working on LinkedIn main character energy. Welcome to Working on It, the podcast that helps you navigate today's work environment. I'm Lauren Spearman, brand consultant and advocate for care, transparency and flexibility at work.
And I'm Molly Johnson-Jones, CEO and co-founder of Flexa. Lauren and I are here to provide you with practical advice, insightful discussion and some expert guidance on how to thrive in your career.
In this episode, we're diving into the world of professional social media drama and discourse. From viral humble brags to career manifestos, we'll explore what makes someone the main character on LinkedIn, for better or worse.
We'll also discuss effective professional networking online, navigating discourse, and how to build a genuine personal brand without becoming LinkedIn's latest viral sensation.
Quick thanks to our episode sponsor. More on them later. Molly, before we get started, could we address...
Already.
No, I feel for anyone watching this on YouTube, you're in for a treat. You're looking banging. Just got a new hairdo. You look gorge.
For once, it's been blow dry.
Let's dive right into this.
LinkedIn.
Molly, when we talk about LinkedIn kind of main character syndrome, energy, big dick energy, whatever you want to call it, how would you start dissecting that? What does that mean for you?
First of all, I would say, are you saying that to me?
This is a personal question. How do you show big dick energy on LinkedIn? LinkedIn's your platform of choice, isn't it?
It is my platform of choice.
And why is that?
So the reason I picked LinkedIn is I knew that I had to build some form of brand as a founder. Mm-hmm. And we have a pretty strong story at Flexa, and I wanted to get that out there. The idea of being on video all the time 5 years ago when nobody knew who I was or the business was really alien to me. I didn't like Twitter because it's just full of fighting. And LinkedIn made the most sense to me because it was medium form, just written content that you could hide behind your words. And I found that was, I think the most useful to me at that time, but it has changed a lot.
So they've now hit 1 billion members globally.
Yeah,
so
it's bonkers.
It's clearly been a huge rise in that, I think. And there's also... am I lying? Are there stats around an increase in people posting as well? Because I think historically there's been a lot of voyeurs on LinkedIn, hasn't there?
Yeah.
Whereas actually we're seeing more and more people starting to post original content.
Yeah. And LinkedIn's really rewarding that as well in terms of like how they're favouring people on the algorithm. Like they want people to be commenting, posting, like the whole thing is set up to encourage you to both consume content but also post content.
Do you set yourself targets of how much to post?
I try to post every day. I didn't used to. Like, I think there's a whole LinkedIn sort of like cheat sheet and all of the weirdness that I have gone through to understand it. I'd say like posting 3 times a week is what I started with. That was probably where my biggest follower growth was. Like I went from 5,000 followers to about 70,000 followers in just under 2 years, I think.
Wow.
And that was posting 3 times a week.
Yeah.
But now, interestingly, because I do sponsored content, because I have to post about Flexa stuff, because I'll obviously post about the podcast, there's almost too much content for those 3 days. So there's like 3 days of my normal stuff, and then there's 4 days of other stuff that you want to publicise and get out there.
So you're balancing it out that way. And actually, we've seen there's stats from Sprout Social that are saying engagement rates on LinkedIn have increased by 44% year on year.
Yeah.
And I think we're definitely seeing the rise of people feeling more comfortable with contributing to conversation.
Yeah.
So we see, we really see it. One thing that I think it's hard not to address straight off the bat is the increase in rage baiting that I feel like, I don't know about you, I feel like it's really within the last 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
It feels like very new, but it's this almost like if Andrew Tate did LinkedIn.
But what's scary about that, right, is people know where you work and who you are on LinkedIn. Like it's not like you can be an anonymous troll on TikTok, which I actually think it's better that people are held to accountability with those views.
Yeah, I agree.
But that means that there are very likely repercussions if you are responding, and particularly with hateful comments.
But I think I'm seeing that from business owners. I personally am seeing it more from business owners, entrepreneurs. I don't necessarily see loads of that from people that are employed. But obviously you post a lot more content, you're probably seeing that in the comments a lot more, right?
We had a really interesting one the other day. Someone that works at Flexa was posting about Equal Pay Day, was it, on Wednesday? And underneath, this guy just got completely incensed by this topic, and he was like, the gender pay gap doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. And he was fighting with everyone in the comment that was a woman explaining their own experience. And he worked for a very famous handbag brand.
Just screen grab and send.
But imagine if somebody screenshotted that and sent it to their boss. But what was really then interesting was he then blocked absolutely everybody that he'd responded to. So as if he didn't want to be caught for that. It was so strange.
This is my frustration at the moment. So I've gotten a few interactions in the last few weeks with, I call them LinkedIn bros, but there are guys who have an opinion and will really put it out with no substance behind it. And then when you ask them to either expand, they just throw these like, it's like these almost like pre-rehearsed sound bites at you. I had one the other day. he was like, LinkedIn is dead. It's all about X. Brands are going to be spending so much on X next year. Obviously, he was a Trump supporter. And I replied saying, is this satire? Because I was like, I don't want to show my opinion. I just want to expand the conversation. He went, no, it's the truth. And I was like, your opinion doesn't mean it's the truth. It's your truth. Yeah. But it's not fact. It's not fucking science.
But that is the whole LinkedIn main character energy.
Yeah.
I think people love divisive opinions. I always say that the thing that gets the most engagement is a topic that isn't binary in nature, but people want it to be. So they can't accept that the nuance and the grey area is where the truth is. Yeah. It's like the in-office versus remote working debate, right? People want it to be remote's the answer or in-office is the answer. Yep. Reality sits in the middle. And how many fights did you see on LinkedIn that were about that?
Oh, completely. It's a boring argument, right? I posted something on LinkedIn the other day that said, it said something like, I'm going to hold your hand when I say this, but two things can be true at once. Yeah. Because I think that's what we're seeing on LinkedIn, this real black and white.
Inability to have nuanced thought.
And also the inability to carry on that conversation and engaging that. I see it a lot where someone will write a comment and I'll ask them to expand on it, or I'd love to hear your experience. And there's never a response. I also had it recently. There was a guy who runs a fashion business and put out that he was hiring for this role. Oh my God. I genuinely thought it was a piss take because it was so ridiculous. It was like, they're hiring a PA or something. And it was like, but it was about 3 roles in one. You know, this is no 9 to 5, be expected to work long hours. Loads of ambiguity. Like, it was just, I mean, also maybe it's a good thing they show you really what to expect. But it was so thoughtlessly written that, again, I commented, is this satire? Because I was just like, surely this is a joke. And the guy came back and he was like, oh, I really like your content. Why? What would you suggest? And I was like, do you know, I'm going to do something differently. I really took the time to send a considered response. Yeah. It was that long that it took me it filled up 3
the character limit on the comments.
And then within 5 minutes, he just deleted it and no acknowledgement of that. And I was like, you actually weren't interested in learning. Yeah. You just wanted someone to come back so that it bumped up your engagement, not because you're actually interested. And I think that's what my frustration that I'm seeing with behaviour on LinkedIn at the moment is. It's just like shouting into the void without any interest in engaging, interacting.
Yeah. And I think that's because of what is ultimately driving more people posting on LinkedIn. Like, how many times at work do you hear personal brand? It's so important. You need to build a personal brand. And I think people think building a personal brand is posting and commenting on LinkedIn.
Yes. And one element of firstly, I think you and I probably both have maybe, when you hear personal brand, what do you feel? What does that mean to you?
I don't have a particularly visceral reaction to the phrase. Like, I don't dislike it or like it. I think it's pretty self-explanatory in terms of like, it is people being aware of you for what you do and what you think.
Yeah. And for me, it's more of, it's your reputation. And,
it is your reputation.
And you know, what people say about you when you're not in the room. I think
people forget those bits though.
Yes. And I think, yes, posting on social media, posting on LinkedIn is one part of that. But your personal brand is what your colleagues think of you, what you're like to work with, what, you know, any third parties that work with you, what they feel like, would they recommend you for other jobs? It's also your wider network. But, you know, in a couple of episodes back in the networking session, we talked about how important your network is for your career. And I think posting on social is another element of that, but it's not the entirety of your personal brand, your reputation, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And I think another reason that there's been all of this engagement online with this idea of personal branding is because we've become, so much of our lives is now online, right? If you see on TikTok, people obviously like vlogging, you know exactly what they're doing every single day. That's become much more normalized. Whereas 10 years ago, the majority of people would have been horrified by that notion. And I think we've gotten to the point where now there's this what a lot of psychologists call like digital identity performance, of like they want to have an identity online that is sort of aspirational in many ways, and we're moving from it not just being life, now it's work as well. And so people are like, I am using LinkedIn as this stage for me to perform in front of people and to get them to know me professionally and to think I'm great. And I find that very interesting as a kind of concept, because it's not just about the bits of the personal brand you're talking about. In reality, are you good at your job? What do your colleagues say about you? What do people that meet you say about you? I think people just think it's like, oh, this online persona is what I'm chasing.
Yeah, whereas that's can be useful to a point, but actually you might not even be attracting people that are really helpful to your career.
I think, and what it comes down to is exactly what you were just saying around like, what are people trying to achieve from having a personal brand?
Yeah.
It's not just, oh, I want people to like my posts and I want people to give me a top voice badge. And I don't think people have thought that through.
I think you raise a really good point about what are you using LinkedIn for? If you are using it to raise your profile, get into front of a bigger audience, maybe get in front of contacts. I think there's a couple of things. I actually did a presentation earlier in the week, so I'm going to use some of that as a bit of a guide. There are kind of 3 things I think you should do when you're thinking about how you want to show up on LinkedIn in a work capacity. One is a little bit of like self-reflection. So like, what topics ignite your excitement? What are you passionate about?
Also, what can you legitimately be perceived as an expert?
Yes, what is your own experience in? What challenges or problems do you enjoy solving for yourself or others?
Yeah.
And what type of work gives you a sense of joy or accomplishment? Because I think if you are doing something you are genuinely interested in, it's going to be easier to be consistent with that and keep going as well.
Yeah.
So little did I know a year ago, the things that bring me joy, excitement, or ignite curiosity was talking about job descriptions.
But you never would have found that out without doing it. And I think that's actually one really interesting.
There is a bit of testing then.
Yeah, I think that's one really interesting thing is when anybody talks about personal brand, like both of us obviously advise on it and talk about it a lot. When we talk about personal brand, I think a lot of people kind of take that to be like, oh, one day you just sit down and all of a sudden you can consistently post 3 times a week about a topic and become an expert. I think maybe we don't talk about it enough, but like the beginning phases of working out what your niche is, working out what you like talking about.
Yeah, so that self-reflection I think is really important. Then I think there's almost the next phase is defining your value. So actually what skills at work are you really strong at? And what do you get feedback on a lot? What compliments do you receive at work that actually there must be something there that maybe you can scratch an itch? And then also what unique experiences or perspectives do you bring that maybe someone else doesn't bring? So I talk about, this is like basic as shit, but like I've started recently talking about being a woman in marketing over 40, which is not unique in per se, but
it's very relatable though, right?
People fall off a cliff, women fall off a cliff in marketing over the age of 40, and I want to show up as someone in that industry. And then finally kind of, I call it clarifying your purpose. So actually what impact do you want to have on others? What legacy do you want to leave behind? Who do you feel most driven to help and serve? So with mine, I think my following has grown by accident, but actually the people that I'm trying to help are those who are either struggling with work or they're changing their career or they want to make some move in their career. And sometimes that does piss off a few business owners because I'm calling out bad behaviour where they're not treating someone well in the hiring process. As I experienced recently with one of the owners that I called out a terrible hiring practice keeps commenting on my LinkedIn.
Oh, lovely. And I think, those tips that you give for employees are really, really useful. And then to add to that, there's a very different angle of personal branding for founders and leaders as well, because it's not just about personal branding. It's like, what are you trying to achieve from that? It's more like a funnel. And that's where I think a lot of the main character energy stuff comes in.
So, oh my God. Okay, so this is another interaction with someone. There's a theme with some of these interactions. They all get an investment from the same person. There was someone recently who posted like on LinkedIn.
Investment as in VC investment from the same
investor.
Okay.
Like a single person.
One person.
Yeah. They post on LinkedIn going, want to know our flexible working policy? We don't have one. And then went into this rant. And I then posted in the comments about the the benefits of a flexible working policy. He was responding to all the bros who were like, and ignoring what I thought was a well-considered response and just a different view for them to consider. Again, he just deleted his post. When we talk about this like main character energy on LinkedIn, maybe it's just my feed and this is not a good thing. It's not necessarily people I follow, but I see this growing consort of people that are like entrepreneurs, young business people who their first hire is like a video editor to just follow them around and create a load of content. They are incredibly unexperienced when it comes to leadership, and they have these really performative, like, I failed at leadership because I've learned this, but they don't really give a shit.
They're not rectifying it.
And
anyway.
It's just like so damaging. And I guess that's what's driving passion in my kind of day job or whatever, is I don't want people to think that this really toxic way of working that we've come so far away from is coming back, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I think it's also that comes back to that anxiety of the importance of building a personal brand. A study in 2024 by the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology found that 72% of professionals feel pressure to maintain an active presence on LinkedIn. And 45% have anxiety around how they're perceived on the platform. And I think some of that stems from seeing those with the LinkedIn big dick energy and being like, A, I can't be that. B, I don't want to be that. If I'm posting, am I being seen like that too? And it's kind of people getting tarred with that brush. Because to begin with, posting on LinkedIn, it does feel very like, oh, what right do I have to post here? Like, why would people care about my views? And I think because there's so much shamelessness on the other side of it, people worry that that makes them seem like that too.
One of my favourite like shameless posts is when people talk about being the fastest growing company in whatever their sector. It's like, what evidence do you have? It's like
Normally just hiring, which is a terrible proxy for actual growth.
It's just such a ridiculous, like, there's no evidence. It's like, we're the fastest growing, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, yeah.
Do you know my least favourite thing to ever see on LinkedIn is when people say, and this honestly annoys me more than it like reasonably should do, when people use the cat is out of the bag about something that no one cares about. That cat was never in the bag and no one cared if the cat was in or out of the bag.
No one even knew there was a bag.
Exactly. No one gives a fuck.
It's the same as like all the adjectives you use to announce something.
Humbled.
Oh, and the thing is, I'm humbled, I'm excited, I'm thrilled, but it's also like I feel quite accepting of that, because I do feel like people, do you want to dance around houses or do you just want to announce something? Fair enough.
Or the posts that are like, I saw a homeless person on my way to work and then I gave them a pizza and then I went into a job interview the next day and actually it was a homeless person pretending to be homeless and now they're my boss.
You're just like, that did not happen. The worst is when you see people who have, I can't imagine ever doing this, just literally copy and pasting someone's post and then passing it off as your own.
All the time.
What? Like,
happens to me all the time.
How would you not be embarrassed by that? And then I'm also seeing, and you must see this a lot because you have, a much bigger following on LinkedIn, the rise of AI comments.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Actually, that also irrationally annoys me. So when people do the AI comments, because it summarizes your post and then then it spouts it back to you, and I'm just sitting there going, I know, I wrote it. Why are you telling me something I already know?
Do you think the rise of AI comments is coming down to this pressure to be seen on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think people have now see it as a must-do task. And with many must-do tasks, people are like, I can automate that.
Yeah.
Whereas actually,
that's not what AI should be used for. It's like,
no.
It shouldn't be doing the thinking for you.
No, but also so much research shows on LinkedIn that the kind of stuff that goes down the best, like personal stories, relatable experiences, AI cannot replicate that. And I think people potentially very misguidedly see building a presence on LinkedIn as something that is easy and can just be automated and done. You might as well just not waste your time.
Yeah.
It needs to be intentional. You need to think about the strategy behind it. You need to think about how it's a funnel to whatever your conversion is at the very bottom. You need to think about how the rest of your personal brand actually complements it in terms of, how people talk about you, how people perceive you in public, what people generally think about you day to day. And I don't think that people are thinking that through. They're just going, on my to-do list was post 3 times and comment 40 times.
Yeah.
AI's done that for me, but it's really obvious.
And it's not meaningful. It doesn't drive you any closer to that person that you are commenting on. I'm sure we see it in both a lot in our comments. You can see the comments that are really well considered.
Yeah.
And they stand up more. They're way more memorable.
And they engage actual conversation.
Yeah. Rather than a tick box exercise.
So have you heard of LinkedIn lunatics?
No, go on.
So I think it's a Reddit thread or what's it called
You
when they're
want
not a threat. So yeah. So
you mentioned it. Oh my God, are you?
So LinkedIn Lunatics, how many people, I fucking read it, has 695,000 members, right? And this is where people get called out for being...
Oh, it's like tattle for people on LinkedIn.
No, it's just
that's
ridiculous.
Not nice.
It's ridiculous LinkedIn posts. So here's one. There's a man that's posted and it says, in San Francisco, enter. I asked my Uber driver, enter, is this your own car? Enter. He replied, yes, it is mine. It is the new Bentley model. Enter. I asked, enter, you seem to be rich. Enter. Why are you driving for Uber? He replied, I love driving my car. This gives me the reason to drive. Always find a way to do what you love. #HR.
Hashtag's fun.
So that gives you a flavour of LinkedIn Lunatics,
Did someone put
right?
one of your posts on there?
Yeah.
Please read it out.
Okay. The fact that I'm searching for myself in LinkedIn Lunatics, actually, like, it was a life highlight for me.
Was this recent?
How long ago? 5 months ago.
Okay, go on.
And you know that you were like rage baiting. This isn't rage bait, it's clickbait. I went over Daily Mail. Are you a twat?
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Eyeball emoji. Which days are your standard days in the office each week? Opinion is pretty split between twats, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday office goers, and maths, Monday and Friday office goers. Both groups think the other is wrong, and then I went into the rest of it. The trouble is, I didn't actually know that the word twat in America is incredibly offensive.
Oh.
It's like the C word here.
Well, are they?
And this is an American
this is
Reddit.
brilliant.
So it got 1.8 thousand upvotes on Reddit, and everyone in the comments is just going wild.
What kind of thing? What?
Oh, just people being silly. They're like, where are a few comments? It's like,
I mean, that's just a misunderstanding of language.
I think
Well,
so.
like
Also, what I do think is interesting is there aren't as many, or increasingly so there aren't as many women that have very large followings on LinkedIn versus men, because I think it was naturally like I'm a founder, the tech bro kind of persona that people would expect that. And so I think when I post something that's more clickbaity, it seems more shocking because you don't expect that to come from a female founder necessarily. But people were just joking in the comments. They were like, again, very American, I'm more of a shithead, sole home income taker, having engineering as discipline. I'm a hoe, hybrid office environment. Like, generally the comments weren't bad. It was like people having a laugh. But I found out that happened because one of my husband's friends is quite a big fan of LinkedIn Lunatics, and he just screenshot it and was like, lol.
You've made it.
But that's what people say, right? They say that you've made it once you start getting trolls.
It's not like you wrote something that when you read it back is inappropriate.
Oh, I'm sure I have. But
yeah, just not that one.
Not that one. I think also there's a lot of confusion on LinkedIn I think because people make up so much for engagement when there are actually genuinely really interesting stories. And like, I've told stories that other people have sent me and people have been like, that didn't happen. And I think there's a lot of just accusation of like people assuming that content is made up for vanity metrics and those kind of values.
Which I'm sure there is a percentage where that happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Recently, whenever I'm trying to share a story, I always try to provide the evidence with it through either a photo or a video or something to prove that I'm not like...
Yeah, to prove that you're not making it up.
I haven't got a good enough imagination to make it up.
Do you want to hear more?
Absolutely.
This is a man building a portfolio of bootstrap businesses.
Okay, go on then.
Imagine struggling on a $350,000 a year salary. 3 easy fixes for you. 1, don't get a formal education. It's a waste of time and money. 2, don't own a car. In 95% of cases, it's a luxury. Walk or bike and get in better shape. 3, don't own a house. It's a liability, not an asset. Rent instead. It's not the world, it's you. You don't need professional help. You need to fix the lifestyle creep that you've allowed. £350,000 a year?
But it's also,
why is he advising people not to get formal education? If they're making 350 grand a year, they've probably already made that choice.
Yeah.
not to have either gone or not gone.
But it's like, that is a perfect example of something being so black and white, and this is the only way to do stuff. And actually, I was having a conversation with someone yesterday. I'm going to toot our own horn. I was saying what I enjoy about these conversations with you is I think we explore that there are different avenues and different ways of doing something.
Absolutely.
Molly, one thing I spotted, I've actually seen this growing again in the last few weeks, and I've even seen it, people talk about it in WhatsApp groups that I'm in, engagement pods.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, I just don't understand. So first of all, we should probably explain what engagement pod is. So it's generally a group of people, and you might have a WhatsApp group or an email chain or whatever it is. When someone posts on LinkedIn, they share it in the group and everyone goes and likes it.
Yeah.
And the idea is that you do that for everyone else. For me, I just don't see the point of this like fake engagement that ultimately it's the same people again and again.
Yeah.
And then the comments are often, it's like, oh shit, I've just got to write something, oh well done or whatever. It doesn't really mean too much. What are your thoughts on it?
I think, again, you need to think of why you're doing it. So at Flexa, we do have a channel that is like 4 posts that will happen from, but it's normally because it's client posts or somebody mentioning us. So we want people to engage with it, right? And sometimes people will put their own posts in as well, because it does help to have that early stage engagement. But having said that, why we're doing it is because we want our clients' content to go further. If it's just your own and you have the same people liking your post through a link, it won't do any better. So what's very interesting is if you look at LinkedIn performance of posts that are found via a link that's sent versus posts that are found natively, LinkedIn massively over-indexes if it's found natively and somebody scrolls and likes it, rather than it being shared and found via a link.
Got you.
So although engagement pods, in theory, it feels like it's helping because you've immediately got 10 likes and you're not sitting there going, oh God, is anybody going to like my content? You're actually damaging the long-term reach of that post. So
this is more of a byproduct of this chasing virality as the answer to all of your problems.
People think that likes are the measure of success, whereas actually, again, it comes back to you need to be strategic about why you're building a personal brand. Is it to just get loads of likes and then hopefully get some influencer deals, which I think a lot of people think can happen on LinkedIn very easily. You only get those deals if you are an expert and people believe your content, and then those brands will come to you. It's not quite the same as Instagram or TikTok, where it's about getting to an audience.
Yeah, that credibility needs to be there.
Yeah. So I think engagement pods, again, it's looking at the wrong metrics. I think obviously if you're just starting out and you don't have anybody to like your post and you're really nervous about it, like I used to put it on a WhatsApp to a couple of friends and be like, could you like it? Because you don't want nothing. But setting them up specifically with the aim just to like posts, ultimately you are actually damaging your performance.
Also, could you be asked constantly, like going into that group and having to like all that shit? I couldn't be bothered.
But also, again, it's trying to cheat the system, just like AI as well. Like if you aren't thinking, iterating, improving, testing different format, testing different topics, you are not going to succeed.
Yeah, we've really established what is not working on LinkedIn, but should we look at some advice or best practice that we think could be valuable to someone who's considering starting to share more content on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. But first, let's go to an ad break.
Molly, you know what drives me crazy about marketing agencies? They want to take everything off your plate completely.
Oh my God. And then you're stuck paying huge monthly retainers plus markups on your ad spend, getting reports full of stats that really don't mean anything for your business.
That's why I'm excited about House of Performance. Instead of taking over your performance marketing, they come in and actually coach your in-house team.
And what I love is that they bring all of this agency expertise, but they use it to make your existing team stronger. So you get insights from different industries, real practical support, and your team actually grows their skills instead of just outsourcing everything.
Plus, when you invest in your team like this, they're way more likely to stick around because they feel like they're developing.
If you want to get more out of your marketing without the huge agency fees, then head to houseofperformance.co.uk and mention working on it for a free strategy session with their team. So let's dive into some best practices and tips for building a genuine personal brand on LinkedIn and not trying to embody LinkedIn main character energy.
So it's interesting you say that. So Northwestern University have carried out some really interesting research about, it's called the professional authenticity paradox. Yeah. So the more authentic someone tries to appear online, the less authentic they're often perceived.
Like the crying CEO. Perfect example.
It's that really like the forced experience rather than I think you can tell when someone's really trying to show that they're putting this out to be performative versus this genuinely was quite interesting.
And we're going to come at this from 2 different angles, right? Like your personal brand advice
as an employee versus yours as a founder or business owner or anyone kind of coming from a company background.
And I think we've obviously touched on some of the early advice in terms of you need to give yourself time to work out exactly what kind of topics you're enthusiastic about, what relates to your audience, and that you can keep producing content on, because ultimately it's not easy to keep day in, day out producing content on a topic or adjacent topics.
Yeah. I think it's, I mean, this is advice I'd give to any clients I work with. There should always, although we talk about defining what you do want to talk about, I think there should almost always be an element of testing and learning.
Always.
You know, and sometimes you kind of test and learn, you like try something new and it flies, sometimes absolutely bombs. And the good thing about if it bombs is no one's seen it. So it's all good.
It's only your pride that's hurt.
Yes.
And so I think that's a really important part of it. And then working out what you're doing it for, because that really, really does impact how you'll build it, the kind of CTAs, if you call to actions, if you have any, but also where you're putting that content as well.
Yeah.
Like obviously there's LinkedIn too, but like, are you starting a newsletter? Are you also putting it on TikTok? Are you trying to run a LinkedIn newsletter? Are you doing it in comments as well? Like it will affect your entire strategy.
I have like 5 top tips for,
Perfect,
as an employee, how you could maybe start to show up on LinkedIn, I guess. So we've obviously done a bit of like self-reflecting, define your value, what's your purpose, like what kind of stuff. But I think it's all very, very easy for us to say this when we are quite confident in putting content out, and that's not always the case for everyone. So my number one, like start it, almost like beginner guide, is just start contributing to conversation on other people's content.
Yeah.
Get comfortable with putting an opinion out there and pressing post.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily from your own account, but it's feeling like you can add something to the conversation and then see what happens. And that's always quite a good starting point.
Absolutely. And that's really good advice.
I also think one thing that I've noticed people, really do kind of lap up and enjoy is reviews and recommendations. So, we know that word of mouth is always the biggest driver. So if there are things that you have seen, you've done, courses you've taken, don't be afraid to share that. Don't be afraid to, recommend things, review something you've done. Whenever I've shared a course that I've done, a podcast that I've listened to, I think that, again, we talk about, content being shared. I think that's where I see a lot of that is from sharing things I do think are quite valuable to
and
my
other
own
people
industry
will want to share.
And the job that I do. Yeah. Sharing lessons and things that you've learned, but not in a LinkedIn lunatics way. I think the more simple you can make things, obviously the easier it is to understand. To be the smartest is not to be the most complicated. I think the more you can simplify it, the more people will understand. And then, I don't know if you ever do this, but often things that people will leave in the comments can spark quite interesting conversation. So what are people saying in the comments to content? Is there anything you can take from that?
And then can you then use that for future content?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then finally, which I am not the best at, I don't always practice what I preach, but being consistent. So I think a really good way to get started, even if you say I'm just going to post once a week, we can often feel pressure to be like, I have to be the best immediately. And I was talking to someone about this recently, like my own experience at putting content online, and they were like, if you hired someone with a year's experience, would you expect them to be at the top of their game? And I was like, no. And they're like, but you've been doing this for a year, so why are you putting that pressure on yourself to be
That's a good point.
Great? So
you don't need to put big pressure on yourself.
No. So even if that consistency is once a week, that's great. Keep going with that until it feels more comfortable to add more in.
So I just read a really interesting stat. Only 1% of LinkedIn's users actually post.
Wow.
Yeah, because I guess if you said the billion users.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah.
Then that's still a lot of people posting. But I think that's really interesting because there's a lot of lurkers and people obviously consuming content but not necessarily taking the plunge. So I wanted to share posting 3 to 4 times a week. What happened in 12 months of posting on LinkedIn 3 to 4 times a week.
Oh, of your own posting?
Of my own posting.
Oh, divulge.
So in a year of posting on LinkedIn 3 to 4 times a week, this is what it generated. So I'm going to start at the top with the vanity metrics and then work down to the actual outcomes and what I wanted to achieve. So I got 16 million impressions in a year, 164,129 likes. I added 33,000 followers. I got 11 sponsored content opportunities, generated 299 leads for Flexa, and made over 300,000 in directly attributable revenue for Flexa.
Wow.
Which is mad.
That is incredible.
In 1 year of posting.
Bloody hell.
I had 4,000 followers, everybody has the sort of followers because you've connected with people. For 4,000 followers, yeah. Pretty mad, eh?
That's so impressive.
And I'd say on the days I was posting, that took me an hour a day, because you obviously think of, I've never pre-planned anything. That's not how my brain works. I'd think of a thing. I'd often voice note myself ideas. I'd pick one of them. I'd write that post, finesse it for 20, 30 minutes, then spend the next half an hour engaging with those comments. So I carved out an hour every day that I was posting. And that's all of the time that it took me. I then didn't let it, seep into, I'm checking all the time. I'd come back periodically if I was walking somewhere.
And it's interesting because if you said to someone, right, 5 hours a week, you're going to be writing LinkedIn post, you're like, well, hang on a minute, if you've got 7.5 hour days, that's almost a day a week. But actually it's like, but if it's a day a week of business development, sales, like, driving sales, that's huge. Now you can put a number against it. That's huge.
Yeah. And I think there's increased awareness of that now. I remember when we first started Flexa, I was talking to an investor and they were like, why are you posting on LinkedIn? It's a total waste of time. He was like, you're chasing fame. And I don't think that's a good thing for founders to do. And I was like, I'm not trying to make myself famous. I'm trying to make Flexa famous.
Yeah.
That's very different. And he was like, it was one of the reasons he didn't invest was because of that, which I found fascinating. Well, now, whatever.
Do you think maybe that's why at the beginning of this episode, when we talk about this like LinkedIn main character energy, it comes across like they're not doing it for their business. It comes
across as vanity.
And
exactly.
And that's the difference. And that's why some of us recoil when we see that, because it doesn't feel like that's you can see through it.
You can see through it. And I think also people just assume if you are posting on LinkedIn that you are trying to embody that LinkedIn main character energy, whereas actually there are so many other outcomes, whether that's professionally, whether that's personally. If you're thinking through it and you're strategic about it and you're not chasing vanity metrics, I think that's also quite obvious when you can see that there is consideration and strategy behind it.
Yeah, that's really impressive. Go you.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
But also now that you can see it's worthwhile, it's easier to justify the time being spent on it.
Exactly, and it's a no-brainer now. And I mean, obviously there's frustrations, and I know a lot of other kind of LinkedIn influencers, for lack of a better term, that have been quite frustrated with all the algorithm changes and how often it does shake it up and make it quite difficult. I think they're struggling to balance trying to encourage more and more people to share content with also still rewarding the people that have been there for the last 4 years.
Yes, yeah.
Which is a tricky balance for any social media platform. But should we go to a real life story?
Oh, yes, let's. So this week let's dive in. I recently started a new job and feel pressure to post about it constantly on LinkedIn. My manager is very active on the platform and often reshares employee content. While I want to be visible and support my company, I'm uncomfortable with how performative it feels. How do I navigate this without hurting my career prospects?
Well, first of all, you should never feel like you have to do something. And it shouldn't be that if you don't do it, it will hurt your career prospects, unless that was clearly outlined as an expectation.
Yeah, because it says that they feel pressure, but not that they're being asked to directly.
Yeah.
But given that the fact that their manager is very active and is often resharing content, they can maybe feel like there is an expectation.
Yeah. The best way is understand why you don't want to do it. Do you not want to do it because you genuinely are not interested in it? Or do you not want to do it because you're not sure how you'll come across or how to do it? I think there's a big difference between those two things, because there are plenty of people in the world that have absolutely no interest in building a personal brand online, which I completely respect.
Yeah.
But also there shouldn't be that kind of fear of, how will I come across? Because to your point earlier, when you start out, if you're getting 10, 12 likes, no one sees that. People, like thousands of people, don't see posts with only 10 or 12 likes.
Yes, yeah. So if you want to, I guess, succumb to that pressure and try it to see if actually it is something you feel comfortable with.
It's pretty low risk.
Yes, yeah.
And again, what we've been talking about is, although it might feel performative, I think it feels performative because we see a lot of people performing. But actually, in reality, most people on LinkedIn posting content are not those LinkedIn main characters.
Yes, yeah, that's true. The question around how do I navigate it without hurting my career prospects? It sounds like the question is more directed at their boss rather than their wider career.
Yeah. And I'd say having a conversation and being like, either I'm interested in trying to start posting about a company and my career on LinkedIn, or out of interest, is this really important? And if so, why? Because I'm not sure I'm comfortable. You can approach the conversation in two ways, right?
I would also ask, like, what are the as if their boss is encouraging that employee content, what are the parameters of that?
Yeah.
Because I also think, it's a no-brainer that you wouldn't necessarily share direct revenue numbers if you weren't, the business owner or whatever. There's certain things that I think maybe feel obvious, but there's also certain things that they may say, actually, we're not going to talk about this, but we really encourage you to share this kind of element. I think that can really, having some ground rules can help you feel more comfortable to know that. Or if you do want to start trying, don't be afraid to sense check it with your manager and say, what do you think of this?
Exactly. I think it's such a valuable thing for companies to invest in if people are interested as well, as like workshops or education around personal branding. And if you want people to post on LinkedIn about your company or about their roles, exactly, what are the guidelines, what are the tips and tricks, what are you encouraging, and just helping to educate people on how to build their own career visibility.
And I think the reason why maybe the manager is encouraging of sharing employee content is because those numbers that you talked about earlier, you wouldn't have hit that if you'd shared it from the company page.
No.
People buy into people. They're interested in people's stories. They're interested in people's real life experiences.
Yeah, the reach was over 3 times higher on employee or individual content than it is on company page content.
Okay. So that makes a whole lot of sense why the manager would be encouraging of that, because there's overall business sense. But it shouldn't be to the detriment of you feeling incredibly pressured to do that if that isn't something you've agreed when you've joined the business.
If there shouldn't be an out-and-out expectation. It can be encouraged, but then people need to feel supported as well as encouraged.
Yeah. So I think it's probably worth having a conversation with your boss about it and vocalising that, and then being able to kind of find that balance between putting the content out but feeling like you're still staying true to yourself.
So obviously you started off building your personal brand on TikTok. How has it been trying to bring it over to LinkedIn?
Really interesting, actually. I pushed against posting on LinkedIn for a while, mainly because I hate writing, and I've always seen LinkedIn as a platform with a lot more written content.
Yeah.
So I've always found it less interesting or less relevant for me. And then I'm very fortunate that most of my content is video first, and LinkedIn are pushing video.
Yeah, it's a good time for you.
And actually, I'm looking at my stats now on LinkedIn, and you can see like the sharp rise of 3 months ago when I started posting content. And that's very recent for me. Like, I did a whole year of posting on TikTok, and then only the last few months. And obviously throughout my career, I've jibs and jabs.
Yeah. Why did you bring it across to LinkedIn?
Because I thought, why not try? If I'm making that content, I don't necessarily differentiate a lot between the content. I often repost the same content.
Yep.
The difference is I repost it with a bit more commentary on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Where I have seen like quite high reach is much more humour-led stuff. I think LinkedIn can feel quite heavy. It can obviously get quite corporate at times. So I tried to bring in humour just to break that up. And I think that's where a lot of the reach is coming from, is kind of taking the piss or having a bit of a laugh sometimes. So I'm really weirdly starting to enjoy it quite a lot. And
because you brought your own personality
to
it.
And I think that shows in the comments as well. I think their comments are much more engaging than they maybe have ever previously been. With TikTok, for example, it's very short form commentary, whereas LinkedIn is much more in depth. That was a conscious decision 3 months ago to maybe start testing. And again, we talked about this in the episode earlier, testing and learning, trying. And if it wasn't working, then fine, no one's seen it.
Yeah. But it's a low risk thing to have to do.
I haven't even got 20,000 followers on LinkedIn, but some of the content recently has been like 750,000 kind of reach, which is just...
Which is amazing.
Insane.
So I think the key takeaway here is that effective LinkedIn personal branding is not about being a main character chasing vanity metrics and posting ridiculous content of made-up stories. It's really about thinking through why you're there and consistently adding value to whatever community you're aiming to build.
Yeah, I think it's balancing that visibility and bringing value without making it all about you. What can your audience take away from that?
Exactly.
That's it for this week. If you want to share your own experiences, please, as ever, reach out to us on Instagram or TikTok at workingonit.pod or email us hello@workingonit.show.
Next time on the podcast, we're working on quiet quitting. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Until then, keep working on it.